Hello and welcome to episode 39 of The Thing About Golf, the podcast series from Golf Australia magazine that seeks to answer the unanswerable question: what does draw people to this infuriating game? My name's Rod Murray, and alongside the man on the other end of this Skype call, John Huggan, we bring you these in-depth interviews on a fortnightly basis with a range of characters from the golf industry, from players and writers to entrepreneurs, and today's area of interest, administrators. Now, in the world of golf administration, fish don't come much bigger than the chief executive of the R&A, and it is indeed Martin Slumbers who has subjected himself to a Huggy interrogation for this episode. John Huggan joins me on the line, cackling in the background, to set the stage for this interview, which I think Huggy has a lot in it if you listen carefully. Slumbers is the consummate politician, but I can't help but think he's one of the good guys. He's quite determined in his goals, and he's genuinely passionate about the game.
Yeah, I actually quite like Martin Slumbers, despite my image as an R&A knocker. But yes, he's a nice guy. His heart's in the right place. There's no doubt about that. But the downside of, if there is a downside to getting an hour's chat with somebody like him who's so embedded in the establishment, is that there are things he won't say and there are places he won't go. So I'm sure there's a bit of that in the midst of the interview, if we can call it an interview. So I like to think of it more of a as a chat than an interview, but because it's too easy to lapse into just firing questions at them. When you get people like that, a conversation I always think is better. Very much, and you have to listen to a guy like Slumbers to pick up on the little notes, because he is extremely good. Embedded in the establishment, Huggy, isn't he the establishment? Really? well, absolutely. Yeah, you can't get any more establishment than the head guy at the R&A, or the equivalent at the USGA, I suppose. But he did mention Mr. Sutherland at Golf Australia in the midst of our talk as well.
He did. Yes, I was.
He's another one. So.
I was interested to hear that. A couple of things that I think people should listen out for, Huggy, are the things that sort of grabbed me, apart from the distance bit, which we'll come to at some point.
Yeah,
no doubt.
Inevitably. Yeah.
Inevitably, that's exactly right. He's very big, and I'm very big on this as well. How do we talk to non-golfers? Super important issue, isn't it? Because we have our own press, we have our own language, we have our own world that we live in golf, and we fail to see sometimes that we're not penetrating beyond that. People outside of golf don't know about or care about a lot of the stuff that we talk about.
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, I think he came back to that phrase about three times over the course of the hour. So he's definitely passionate about that. And the R&A of which we mentioned again, they're into the basically rebuilding a golf facility near Glasgow in Scotland to cater for, as he put it, the whole family. There'll be a driving range, a chipping green, putting, all the rest of it, all the things that kids would gravitate to more than adults, but plenty of room for adults to have fun as well. And that seems to me to make perfect sense. I mean, that kind of place is the future. As he pointed out, the golf club memberships, certainly in this part of the world, have gone down every year for about the last decade. So the golf club model is less and less, less applicable.
Less and less appealing, exactly. And of course, that's the base that funds, certainly here in Australia, the base that funds Golf Australia, the administrator, is in fact that club model. So it's a real conundrum. If it is broken, where do we go to next? And where do the administrators get the finance to go to that next base?
Yeah.
Just on that course that they're getting involved in, I can't imagine the USGA taking that step, although they may do at one point. I can't imagine the R&A doing that under the previous administration. He has brought something quite innovative, hasn't he, Slumbers? You've got to look carefully. They've done it quietly, but that's a huge departure from their normal.
I said that to him. The word departure was the very one I used. And he's the driving force. There's absolutely no doubt about that. This would not be happening if it wasn't for Martin Slumbers. And I'm pretty sure if it's even remotely successful, and I'm sure it will be, it's in the most populated part of Scotland, which isn't Scotland's basically empty for people who don't know, but Glasgow, there's a lot of people in the Glasgow area, so he's doing the right thing there, and I've got high hopes for him. I think in the R&A, I can see them doing more of that if it's successful.
He also strikes me as the type, Huggy, and this might be the most important part. They'll open at the facility the way they think it should be and what will attract people, but I get the sense that if it doesn't work immediately, he's open to the notion of, well, let's change that model a bit and tinker with it until we get it right. And that's more important even than coming up with the initial idea in some ways, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. He's not a man short of ideas. I mean, it's if you look at his CV, I mean, which I did before I talked to him earlier today.
Make you nervous, wouldn't it, Huggy? Jesus.
He was pretty high. I mean, he was in really high-powered positions in business. I mean, Deutsche Bank and some big companies, and he was working in Hong Kong, and he was flying to New York every week. I mean, this is a pretty experienced guy when it comes to the business side of things. So he'll have looked into that side of things very carefully before he committed any R&E cash to something like this new project.
Yeah, absolutely. And interesting, and I wonder how much this might be true, Huggy, but in those positions and doing what he was doing, I would imagine he's fairly well ensconced in the upper echelons of US golf administration. He would have been mixing with a lot of people in those circles who are on the USGA board, members at Augusta National. This fraternity would not be new to him. I imagine he's dealing with a lot of people he's already familiar with, even though he's not been in golf administration previously.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he's certainly bumped into some people on that level.
Yeah.
He won't be, overawed by sitting talking to people, high-powered people, if you like, because that's what he is himself.
Yeah, indeed. He said it a couple of times, Huggy, and it's a classic politician speak, isn't it? It's a get-out-of-jail-free card. The tours only represent 1% of the game.
Yeah.
Quite true, isn't it? It's not really a true... They represent 1% of players, perhaps, but they are much more than 1% of the game. And that's awkward for the R&A, isn't it, and the USGA, because they have no real control over that segment of the game, which is so influential.
Yeah, I mean, it made me smile a couple of times, you're right, because the R&A and I think the USGA are the same. There's definitely an arm's length relationship in many areas between the two, the establishment bodies and the tours, if you can put it that way. And, he's never going to say something like that. That's one of the things that these guys never say, but... Again, as you put it, if you know where to look, there's not friction, but there's certainly, as I say, an arm's length relationship between the two bodies.
He used some fairly strong language when he came to the discussion about bifurcation and distance and those sorts of things. It seems pretty clear, Huggy, that the Distance Insight report, which we know got delayed because of COVID last year, but we saw the sneak peek of what had come out prior to that. There's some strong language in there, isn't there? And it seems to me that the decision's been taken. They're not going to bifurcate, as he said. It's binary. He doesn't like the nature of the word, so he refuses to use it, which is also an interesting kind of a notion for someone in his position. But this notion of a whole bunch of different local rules to try to control who gets to use what equipment. What's your take on that? It looks like it's going to be the way forward. You happy with that as an idea, do you think?
Well, it's a way around it, isn't it? It's without actually coming out and saying the word, which he refuses to do. But the bottom line is... like his predecessor, Peter Dawson, he's one of us when it comes to the distance thing. I mean, again, this is the classic example of somewhere he can't go verbally, but he's off the record. I would have to think that he's definitely on the side of something needs to be done, because the golf courses, at the top level are I keep going back to the notion of where are these guys going to play in 10 years' time?
Absolutely.
Because, Bryson DeChambeau is going to be the norm in a decade from now if they don't do anything about it.
Without going into that, Huggy, and I kind of thought the same thing in many ways about the putter rule that they made, and you can criticise it and have a different position, but it's quite clever to attack this from a local rules position because it's not the R&A or the USGA enforcing their view on the PGA Tour. It's up to the PGA Tour which set of rules they choose to play by. Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting way to bat the ball across the net, isn't it? And make them proactively do something.
Yeah, some might say passing the buck.
Well, of course, what you want to avoid,
and here you are, G Monaghan, get on with it.
Well, yeah, but of course, the danger is, and as if you spoke to him about, the danger is you create a schism in the game. If it ends up in court, nobody wins. No, even lawyers, because lawyers play golf. So even they're not winning, which would be a rare occurrence.
Yeah, I mean, I worry about that. I mean, I worry about them, if they lose, where do we go from there?
I think
my goodness.
Well, I think this actually rules out the court problem because it's not the R&A deciding who gets to use what equipment. Some interesting stuff in there. I'd like to hear some more about that, and I'm sure we will hear more about that from Martin Slumbers and from the USGA in coming months. Huggy, I really enjoyed this interview. I think our listeners will enjoy this interview. I do urge them to listen carefully both to what is said and in some cases what isn't said. There's some real clues there as to how the game might be moving forward. So excellent job on your part, my friend, and I hope people enjoy. Thanks for taking some time to chat to us about it.
My pleasure, as always.
Ladies and gents, Martin Slumbers.
Martin Slumbers, thank you for coming on the Thing About Golf podcast. The first question is always the same on this. What is the thing about golf for you?
I think it's a really great question. I think for me, it's the golf is more than just a game. I think what was it Arnold Palmer said? It's the greatest sport mankind ever invented. But for me, it's always had this more broader meaning around health, around social skills, around community, about learning about life. I think it's a great teacher of life, and I certainly have had some experiences on the golf course and with very close friends that have shaped the rest of my life. It's that ability to play competitively as well as socially and have a chat. But I think at the end of the day, it's a game that I've always felt anyone can play. There are no real barriers to play, but that is a challenge for the game in trying to make that clear. And you can play it all your life. I mean, I'm in my 60s now, and I started playing when I think I was in single digits, but I can't quite remember. It seems such a long time ago.
Yeah. Have you retained any competitive urges? I mean, I know you're a decent low handicap golfer. How much competitive golf have you played, and are you going to play more in the future?
Oh, I've always loved sport, John. There was all sorts of sports from a very, very young age. So I'm inherently competitive. But golf for me, for most of my life, was what I did away from my professional life, working. And I enjoyed it, and I loved competing in doing that. And it's funny you say that, because it's part of the story about how I ended up here. Is that I spent 30 years working in the City of London and absolutely loved it. But I got into my early 50s and thought, well, I'm playing some reasonably good golf. I never had a chance to play seriously competitively when I was younger because of work and everything else. I've got one last chance to do as a senior. It worked out. I'd been reasonably successful in my career. So I was able to retire with the sole intention of playing full-time seniors golf.
Really? Wow.
Or amateur golf. I'm an amateur through and through. I did that, and for 6 months I played golf all the time. And actually, at that point, I realised I wasn't made out to just play sport the whole time.
Right. Okay. It was just your version of a midlife crisis.
Oh, it was certainly. My children definitely thought it was a midlife crisis.
Right. Okay. You didn't buy a sports car and open top, or?
Oh, I've done all of that.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, what was the kind of, what had been the peak of your competitive life then on the course? Run me through your wins and losses.
I mean, I think my abiding memory of playing golf, all sorts of competitions and things, but I love scratch golf, and I love team scratch golf. And if you gave me one thing to do competitively now, it would be to play scratch team golf. And I'm still fortunate enough to occasionally play for Surrey seniors, and I love that. It's quite fun playing against guys that you played against when you were in your 20s. But I think in terms of in that regard, I was a member of a club down in Sussex called West Sussex Golf Club, Pulborough, which is a beautiful, beautiful course run through the trees. And Sussex has a most fantastic county team event, scratch golf, team of 8, where you play foursomes in the morning, singles in the afternoon. And I played in it for years and years. And then as a group of us got together and we said, actually, we need to do better in this. And let's take it seriously. And that was around...
That's usually famous last words.
I know. It's around 1998. I think I was just approaching my 40s. And we did. And as a group, over 3 years, we went quarterfinal, final, and won it. And I still think it's one of the best teams I've played in. And it just shows how the power of sport, I think, that you got a bunch of people who wanted to do something and put our minds to it. And what's fascinating about it when I look back on it was there was about 12 of us who could get into the team, and all of us, our handicap improved by a minimum of 2 shots in that 3-year period.
Yeah, there's nothing like team golf, or nothing like winning at team golf. Put it that
No,
way. Even losing is a kind of bonding thing, I think.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it's that. Golf has always been a passion for me throughout my life, and but I think that's when I'm at my happiest.
Yeah, well, I can sympathise with that. I've had some great times playing in teams as well. It's the most fun you can have on a golf course, I think. So,
yeah.
Martin, I'm looking at your a brief summary of your business career. I mean, some pretty high-powered names here. But I'm interested in that. You made the jump into the R&A job without even applying for it. I hastened. I think I remember you telling me once. Was there any kind of, if I can put it this way, performance issues early on? I mean, you were suddenly thrown into a slightly different world, I would think, talking to guys that you'd kind of seen from afar, the big names in golf, Tiger Woods and Nicklaus and all the rest of them. What was that like for you early on? And was there any, as I say, any anxiety attached to it?
I mean, I think through my professional career, I got used to dealing with some very senior people. But it's very different when you come into a sport you love and have a real passion for. And, I look at it and say, the business side of golf is a serious business. I mean, there's I've worked with some wonderful people in banking, but, I would put up against them most of the, if not all of the sort of the top people who lead our sport around the world from a business perspective. But there is the professional side, and then you sort of drift between that. It's your business, but actually it's what you spent years watching these guys. I would say some of them I was a little bit intimidated. I mean, I'd be very honest about that.
Yeah, I think anybody would be. Yeah.
But when I think what's really important in this role, and probably any of the other big roles in golf, is if you can't just be a pure businessman and do this. You've got to have a love of the game, and you've got to have an understanding of the game. And I've quietly surprised myself on 2 fronts, John. One is how much I did understand about how the game has been played over decades, and good players and what made good players. But also, I surprised myself, and I think I've said this to you before about my growing passion to make sure the game is better when I finish here than it was when I started. And I think my professional career taught me always about, being results orientated, continuous improvement, and leave the world that you're running better than you took it over with. And I think those two things have really helped. But I have to admit, I remember the first time I met Jack Nicklaus. I did. It was at the Masters, and I did spend half an hour pacing up and down trying to be clear about what I wanted to talk about. But it's been that's been one of the great joys of this job. And I mean, the only person I have not had a chance to talk to, because he sadly passed away, is my favorite golfer of all time, which is Seve Ballesteros. I wish I'd had a chance to have met him.
Yeah, well, I was lucky enough I spent a fair bit of time around Seve. I was his ghostwriter and interviewed him. Went to Virginia a couple of times, and he was a fascinating character. There's no doubt about that. Good and bad, by the way. He wasn't a perfect human being by any means. Has there been any sort of hint of that? I mean, everybody says you should never meet your heroes. I mean, without being too specific, has there been any disappointments involved in all that, or has it just been as you would want it to be? Put it that way.
It's as absolutely as I wanted it to be, and it's not just meeting. I mean, I'm of an age. I mean, I think you're a little bit younger than me, John. But
very slightly, I think.
But I'm of an age and a European where we had the golden era of Sandy Lyle and Nick Faldo and Seve Ballesteros and Ian Woosnam, and apart from Seve, I've had the chance to meet all of them, and not just talk business, but I've played golf with a few of them, and you realize you realize how good these guys are, even when they're not playing competitively. But they're also very thoughtful about our sport, and very, on the whole, very humble. I played with Bernard Langer here in the Pro-Am of the Senior Open a couple of years back, and it was an incredible experience. I started talking to him about, he's famous for his course management and how he thinks about getting around the golf course. Yeah. And we spent time talking about that, and he's got a great sense of humor once he relaxed and felt comfortable. Mm-hmm. And then, to his eternal credit, on the 18th green, he just said, "Thank you very much for everything the R&A does for us in golf." And I look at it and go, "You're one of the greatest players of your generation," and that's actually a really lovely thing to have said.
Yeah, I think you're very lucky, actually, in people that are in positions within the establishment, golf establishment, if you like, is that these guys will talk to you in a way that they won't talk to me as a journalist. I mean, they'll say you get exactly what they think, I'm sure, or a lot closer to exactly what they think on various subjects than they will do saying to a journalist, because they don't want to see it in the magazine or the paper or on the internet the following day. So I think you're very fortunate to be in that position.
And I've also learned over my professional career, John, that never believe that you're the sole possessor of the great idea. And so I have always, and I've done it in my 6 years here, spent time asking questions. I ask a lot more questions than I give opinions, and it's because I want to learn. And the great players of my generation, who I've been fortunate to meet, and some of the younger ones who have also met, they've helped me shape my thinking, and I think that's important for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think and you're in charge of the R&A at a time when, my goodness, there's a lot going on. When you walked in the door, I mean, I think it's safe to say that you've changed things, or certainly the image of the R&A is in the midst of change, if I can put it that way. Mm-hmm. The kind of old fuddy-duddy, old guy sitting asleep in the big chair in front of the window at the R&A clubhouse with the Daily Telegraph over the top of him is kind of, that's kind of gone now, I think. Is that, how important was that? I mean, I always thought that for all the good work that the R&A did over the years, they didn't blow their own trumpets enough, and people didn't know what they did. And the image of the R&A was actually a problem in some ways, because people looked at them with, as I just said, the old guy asleep under the newspaper kind of view. I mean, how much of that were you aware of, and how much of it has it been a priority to change it?
Well, I mean, I do think the inside-out view of certain organizations in golf is very different to the outside-in view. Yeah. I mean, for me, I was not part of the R&A before. I wasn't part of the club. I was a club golfer who had a career, and that's what I loved. But my perception, and when I came into the role, I wanted to build upon what had happened in the past. And, I'm fortunate to have a set of circumstances that meant that modernizing how the R&A works professionally as a business, and works in terms of trying to be more relevant to the game today, it was the right time to have that agenda. I've learned through bitter experience that we're all a victim of the times that we live in, and I'm fortunate to have lived in a time in this job where we can take things forward. And what I've tried to do is to couple of things really. One is not be abashed by being commercial. Mm-hmm. And I'm very proud of the Open Championship. I'm very proud of the AIG Women's Open that we will build. Mm-hmm. But the Open is it is something special in our game. It is a deep part of our history, but it's also, we should be very proud of it here in Britain. It's our championship, and it is also the event that creates all the revenue for the RNA to do everything else in the world.
I was just going to say that it's the only thing that you do that makes money. Am I right in saying that?
Pretty much.
Yeah,
pretty much.
And it makes a lot.
But we shouldn't be frightened of that.
No,
and I'm not. I was very clear that we needed to build a brand for the Open. I know when I interviewed here, one of my final interview, which was 2 or 3 hours long, was around. I was asked to talk about the future of the Open, and I felt the brand was confused. And Peter had started work on that, and I was fortunate enough to build on that. But I think today the Open brand is very clear.
Explain what you mean by that. What do you mean by confused?
Well, I had an interview at Hoylake during the Open, and where when Rory won, and then I was there Thursday, Friday, and then I went home and watched it Saturday, Sunday, and I was watching on Saturday night, I think it was, and I noticed, there was logos of the Royal and Ancient Golf Club. There were logos of the RNA. There were logos of the Open. There were different colours, and I met one of the main tour players who's a friend of mine, and I won't say who it is, but he kind of said to me, it's a bit confusing to what are we playing for and who's in charge. And that resonated with me. And I think the great, the Open is a golf tournament at its heart. And although I'm not frightened about the commercial side of it, I hope I never get accused of losing at the fact that at the center of it it's a golf tournament. But around it needs to be represented in the world with great clarity about what it is. The great championships of the world have very clear messaging. And so, that's something we have worked very hard on. It's a very clear logo. There's only one logo you see. It's one color. It's one look throughout the whole place. And as that same player said to me 4 years later, he said, you drive in the door and you know exactly what you're playing for. And he said it sends tingles down the back of your spine. And I went, yeah, that's what I wanted to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly got a clear identity, the Open. It's the only one that's played, the only major outside America, which is to its huge advantage, I would imagine, certainly commercially. You can put me right on that. But where are we with the Open at the moment? I mean, we didn't have one last year, and this year, I'm sure you're in the midst of thinking about what's going to happen and not really knowing what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 months. What can you tell us at the moment about where things stand?
Well, it's probably the most complicated Open we've ever planned for, in that we've got multiple plans, depending on the health situation that will be, in place come July. But I'm cautiously and increasingly optimistic that we will have fans and significant number of fans at the Open at Royal St George's. We're working very closely with UK government, with the public health, with the local authorities, with the police, and we're getting strong support from the government to have as near as we can a normal Open. Now, I think we're a long way from that at the moment, but
have you ruled that out already? The prospect of just a regular Open. I mean, I can't imagine that you're going to be able to get everybody in.
No, we haven't ruled it out completely. It would be a great, great testament to the success of the vaccine program. I think for the whole of the UK, if we are able to do it.
It just might be a wee bit too soon, though. That's what I'm thinking.
It might just be a wee bit too soon. But we're working through those. I don't want to get ahead of the health issue. The health and safety of everyone who comes is paramount. The only thing I can say for certain is there will be 149th playing of the Open Championship at Royal St George's this July.
Well, that is good news. I think we all I certainly missed it last year. It seemed weird to not have an Open in July. I don't know how you felt about it.
I missed it a lot more than I thought I was going to miss it. Yeah, it was a very, very weird week.
Yeah, and you also missed out on getting you've got the maybe the most famous, or certainly one of the most famous phrases in golf to utter every year. When you first did the prize giving, champion golfer of the year, etc. Did you rehearse it beforehand, or how nervous were you about that?
Oh, it's terrifying.
You were standing in front of the bathroom mirror, I can imagine.
It's I think when you have the privilege of this job, and you're preparing to walk out onto the 18th green with that beautiful trophy, and I can tell you that was the first time I'd ever held it.
Is that the real one? Is it the presentation? Because I know there's a few of them knocking about.
The real one sits here in the club and never leaves.
Right. Yeah.
But it's 1928 version. Solid silver, heavy. It's the one we give the players.
Right.
And I as it sort of maybe reflects a little bit on my personality and my sort of respect for the game, is that when I was being it was being prepared for me to join here, and there was lots of media photographs being done and everything, and I refused to hold the claret jug. And if you actually look, John, you'll only see pictures of the claret jug sitting on the table in front of me.
Right. Why was that then?
Well, I had a sort of rather maybe old-fashioned view that there's only two reasons why you should hold the open jug, the claret jug, which is you've won it, or you're about to give it away to someone who's won it.
Right.
And
you're an old-fashioned soul, for goodness sake.
I am a little bit old-fashioned. Yeah, I have a little bit. I think a lot of what I try to do here is reflect, history in a modern way. But I am a little bit old-fashioned, and so that was the first time I'd held it. You're waiting to walk out, and you try and forget all those people who are watching. And my family had never been to the Open with me and were sitting in the stands, and it was something that was pretty nerve-wracking and doesn't prepare you. Nothing prepares you for standing there and announcing the champion golfer of the year.
So did you rehearse it?
Yes, hundreds of times. Hundreds of times.
That's brilliant, yeah.
Including waking up one night in a cold sweat. And I won't say who the player is, but had a very complicated name. And my dream was that I got said the champion golfer of the year is, and then went into a complete stutter as I couldn't pronounce his name.
Yeah, you don't want Affy Banrat. You'd rather have Ernie else, I would think.
Yeah, and you keep checking the piece of paper in front of you to make sure that you got the person who won it. And if you remember, at 2016, which was my first Open, we had that brilliant, unbelievable Saturday and Sunday between Henrik and Phil. Wow. I mean, I've been lucky. I've had 4 brilliant Opens. I mean, Henrik and Phil was extraordinary. Jordan and Matt at Birkdale. I think people will still talk about the 13th. Yeah. But we can come back to this. But I talk more about the 14th. And then Francesco, who I know, and that was actually quite personal. Seeing Francesco win, and Tiger coming back and playing so brilliantly, and then I think I'll never ever forget Shane Lowry walking down the fairway at Royal Port Rush.
Yeah, that was brilliant. I thought that when I was there and I thought about it afterwards, I thought, why were we not back here, quicker than however many years it was? It was 60 odd years or whatever it was. I mean, it was extraordinary because it was such a huge success. It was wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, in life, you've got to be lucky as much as well as clever, right? In fact, it's better to be luckier than clever. And I think a lot of people in the build-up were hoping Rory was going to be doing that, but that's sport, and it didn't work out that way. But yeah, we got lucky, and I still think that round. I mean, it'd be interesting to know what you think, because I know you're a much better aficionado of links golf than I am, but that round that Shane played on Saturday in that weather has to be one of the great rounds, links rounds.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that I'm biased because I was brought up on a links and played it all my life basically. But to me, it's the only form of the game now, and we'll get into the equipment stuff in a few minutes, I'm sure. It's the only form of the game now where they play in the way that they used to play. Or I've got the chance to play as they used to play, because the weather comes into it, and they've got to manufacture shots, and they've got to come up with different ways of getting the ball in the green and all that kind of stuff. And to me, that's proper golf, if you like, in inverted commas. I don't know how you feel about that.
I'm drawn because I spent most of my life playing on inland golf courses, but I think the creativity that you need to play a links course in championship conditions is a very different game, and it does take more imagination. And I think if you look at the great players who've won it, they've all been people with great imagination. You can't bully. I don't think you can bully a links course unless it's absolute flat calm. But it's interesting if you sort of put together a number of those things we've just talked about, John. And my abiding passion is as I said, to hand the game on better than I inherited it. Is we need to get more people playing our game and understanding our sport. And I have to use the tools that we have available to us. We have these great championships. We have our governance role. We have our network of partners, and it's very important that we, in bringing some of my professional career to the R&A is making sure that we use those tools to tell the story, not just of the R&A, but of golf. We can all wax lyrical about great Open champions, and some of the women's equivalents as well. I mean, Sophia Popov winning last year.
That was a great story. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful story. And leveraging those to actually sell the game is what keeps me going every day.
Yeah, I mean, there's. I mean, I get accused of being overly negative sometimes about golf, but the
surely not.
Yes, well, it has been known amazingly, I'm sure, but it is. But there are far more good things about the game, and my view is that when you have a go at something, or seem to be having a go at something, my view is that I'm always trying to make it better, because there's something wrong with it, So and it could be better.
Yeah, I think there is. I think there's a couple of things on that. I think there is too much in our industry at the professional level, and we all the talk is about professional level, but I never fail to forget that only 1% of people play for money, 99% people play for love, and we don't talk enough about the people who play for love, and I can understand why, but I do think that the industry looks back too often, and I think we should. I love the phrase, and I use it a lot, reflect history in a modern way. The world is, society's changed. Whether we like it or not, society has changed, and it's going to change even more after this COVID pandemic. I mean, we're all going to be slightly different after this. And, it's very important that we stay ahead of that and stay modern of it, but don't forget the past. And that's a real balance for us.
Yeah. Well, funny you should mention that, because it kind of leads me into something that I was determined I was going to ask you about. Whose idea was it to come up with phrases like tide, penalty area, and hole location, rather than all square, hazard, and pin position, which seems to me golf had its own kind of vivid and colourful language that should be preserved and not replaced? Who came up with all that stuff, and why would be my question.
I have to admit, I prefer all square to tide. I was watching the match play the weekend, and tide doesn't sit well. I'm going to gently chide you, John. My friends always tease me because I spent most of my life traveling between here and the United States, mostly New York, and we lived in the Far East for 3 years in Hong Kong. And I spent a lot of time in India, and it really doesn't. I mean, I tend to use words myself that are a mixture of those cultures, and it doesn't bother me as much as it bothers you.
It does bother me. It really bothers me.
I know, but I think as as long as you stay true to what you believe, then that's fine. There are, it's the tomato and tomato discussion and elevators and lifts. I flip between one and the other relatively effortlessly.
Yeah, well, you've managed to dodge the question, of course. You're a consummate politician in that respect. But my original question was, where did it come from? Whose idea was it? And why was it even thought of?
I have no idea. I think it's just evolved. As a time, I think it's evolved. Media's had a huge impact of this. Global media. I mean, I think a lot of the language has evolved from other sports. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably where the all square to Tide has come from. I think Tide is what you would hear in football matches and baseball matches and those sorts of things. I mean, we live in a global media world, and language just evolves. I good on you for keeping challenging me, John.
Well, I won't give up. I'm not going to go away.
You won't hear me say Tide, but I'll say all square. But pin sheets and hole locations. You'll probably hear me say both.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll have to call that an honourable draw then. So. I wanted to get into a little bit with the slow play. You mentioned the match play at the weekend there, and it was marked by some incredibly ponderous playing, if I can put it that way. Is there anything that you guys can ever do about this? I mean, it seems to be that everybody talks. It's like the British weather. Everybody talks about it, but nobody does anything about it. What's your feeling on it? And is there any end to this?
Well, look, I think I am very clear, and I have been very clear on it. Whenever let's talk about the 99% who play for love. Whenever you talk to them and ask them about what are impediments to playing golf or playing more golf, pace of play, time to play, more time to play than pace. Time to play is in the top 3 every single time. And so, it is a crucial issue. We introduced into the rules of golf, the new rules of golf in a number of steps, which were all specifically aligned around pace of play, leaving the pin in, ready golf other than in match play, because that undermines what the principles of match play are. We look at our own championships. I think people, if you look at the Open, put aside Sunday this year, 2019 at Portrush because of the extraordinary weather. We play Saturday and Sunday in about 3 hours 40 minutes, 3 hours 45 minutes, and Thursday, Friday at 4 hours 40 minutes when we're playing in 3 balls, because and that's all driven by players not wanting to step on each other's lines, and our walking referees chivvy everyone along. So, we're doing what we can for our championships. We're doing what we can in amateur golf, and I will consistently talk about it for club golf. And let me just talk about one thing which I do criticize golf hugely about, and it's really become apparent to me in the last few years as we've really tried to get more grip on how do we grow golf. One of the problems with golf, and it's whether it's organizations like the R&A, whether it's the media, whether it's national federations, is all our communication is golf talking to golfers or golfers talking to golfers. Now, if you're only talking to the same people, how the hell do you think you're going to grow the game? Because grow the game means we need to talk to non-golfers. And when we talk to non-golfers, we need to talk to people who might enjoy the game, and we've got to find the barriers to get them to take up the game. And until we all consistently talk to non-golfers, we will not grow this game. And in fact, the traditional game in the developed markets is getting older and it's getting less diverse.
Yeah,
and that is a fundamental. Problem.
They all look like us, Martin.
Yeah, and we've got to stop. We've got to stop talking to us. We've got to talk to new people. And you teased me in my office. I think you were hoping I didn't know the answer to a question.
It does sound like me, yes.
When you said, "Do you know who
Yes.
Niall Horan is?" And I answered and said, "Yes, of course I know who Niall Horan is." And I had already in my mind thought previously that can we find a way of working with him? And
he's enormously important, I think. Hugely important.
He is. But there's if you look at social media following, which sadly is a part of our life today, even the most popular golfers have pretty low social media followings compared to celebrities or other sportsmen. And we are very focused about how do we find a way to work with people who aren't in the traditional golf game but love golf. And Niall Horan, by the way, absolutely loves golf, and he is actually very traditionalist about golf. He and to attract a new audience. I mean, I've been smiling this week. I didn't know Andy Murray loves golf.
Well, his brother was a low handicap player. He was the better player, I think, the older brother. Yeah, and I think his uncle, Andy Murray's uncle, is a golf pro.
Oh, well, I didn't know Jamie plays and Andy plays golf. I didn't know Rafa Nadal plays golf until recently. Now, if we are genuinely going to make the pie bigger, which is what I think about in terms of growing the game, we've got to engage with non-golfers who can engage with non-golfers. And I think we're really excited about our Niall Horan partnership and how that will play out in the coming years.
You've also been getting into the Lethem Hill project at Glasgow, and talk a bit about that. I understand that the motivation is to get more people playing golf, but that's a real departure for the R&A to get into something like that. And I know you mentioned the Women's Open. You've taken that over in the last few years, and the Home Internationals, amateur golf. You're expanding your power base, if you like, which it's no bad thing, I think. But what was the motivation other than the growing of the game? I mean, this is a real departure for the R&A to be getting into running golf clubs, if you like.
Yeah, it is. It is a huge departure, and it's something I've been pushing. But let me just step back and explain why and the realities of what's going on in our sport. And I'm going to talk about the UK, John, but this could be absolutely equivalent for Australia. And in fact, I had a call with James Sutherland, the new CEO of Golf Australia, this week. The end of last week, who I'd met when he was CEO of Cricket Australia, and his thinking is really similar to mine, and the analysis is really simple. But if you look in the UK, there are about 1 million golf club members. But if you look how the number of people who consume golf, and that, when I say consume, I mean 9-hole golf, 18-hole golf, par 3 courses, driving ranges, top golf, all of those things. The number is nearly 10 million. And what's happened in the last 10 to 15 years is that the traditional game has shrunk, and membership of clubs has shrunk pretty much every year since 2006. But the growth of off-course golf has grown significantly. And what Lethem Hill is about is how do we create a facility that would enable us to bring new participants to the game, especially families, that would bring those people who go to off-course golf but introduce them to on-course golf, and create a pathway to traditional membership of a golf club. So it's going to be much. It's a short course. We're redesigning the course down to 9 holes. We're going to have a par 3 course, but we're going to have a number of other facilities, all aimed at families and getting people in. And that's, I think, it's very important that the R&A is not just passionate about growing that pie, but walks the walk as well, and that's what Death and
I
Hill's
think
all about.
places like that are certainly for at least some of the people who come along and give it a try. That it'll be a stepping stone to a golf club for these people. Kingsfield? There's a driving range, little golf course near Linlithgow. I did a story on them a few years ago, and I thought this was the future. I thought because it was a family, as you said, family-oriented place. There was mum and dad, and the kids came along, and there was something for everybody. They could putt, they could chip, they could hit balls on the driving range, they could go and play 9 holes. That to me was far more inclusive than certainly the old style golf clubs were. They were more exclusive than inclusive in many cases, and that was a problem. But I'm with you on that. I think that certainly has to be the future, and it's the way to get more people and a bigger range of people involved. Certainly.
Yes, completely agree, and it would drop. We got to drop some of the barriers down that for people to come and join the game. And pace is time to play is one thing we just talked about. Cost is another, but being inclusive. And if you look now at the R&A purpose, we did a lot of work about. I asked the question of my executive team not long after I joined, and I said, "Well, tell me, what's the point of the R&A? What are we?
I've
what are
asked
we
that
here
question
for?"
myself a few times.
But we know, we and it created, and I used another phrase: "What do we want to be when we grow up?" And I think what we're trying, what the RNA is, again, the timing is right. Is we're able to actually say what we want to be when we grow up, and behind it all, our real driver is, in our purpose, we want to see the game be more open, more inclusive, more accessible, and thriving 50 years from now. I want my grandchildren to feel they can still play golf and get as much fun out of it that you and I have had 50 years from now. And that's what this is all about.
A few years ago, the RNA split, certainly in a legal sense, from the Royal and Ancient Golf Club. Are you still technically the secretary of the golf club? And if so, how much of your time is actually spent on that stuff rather than the bigger issues that we've been talking about?
Yeah, no, I'm secretary of the golf club and chief executive of the RNA. I think the fact that we split is one issue, but the real reason I have a privileged position in the world of golf is because of the Royal and Ancient Golf Club of St Andrews. The fact that it's been here since 1754, the fact that it's the home of golf, that gives us our permit, if you like, to have an opinion. And I never forget that. And the members of this club are, they're real golf people. They want golf to be successful. They enjoy their golf. A lot of them were very, very good at golf, but they want us to be more relevant and helping the game of golf. And I never forget that it's that inherited trust of 260 plus years that enables me to be able to have the opinions that I do have and be able to express them about where the game should be going.
Do you sometimes think to yourself, though, that this rules making business is more trouble than it's worth, and that you should be passing it along to certainly the tours? I mean, they kind of opt out of any kind of rules issues. They kind of point at the RNA and the USGA every time something comes up. I mean, how do you feel about that?
Do you know, you just fell into the trap everyone falls into, John, that you said the tours that represent 1% of the game.
Yes, that's true.
When you take a responsibility to write the rules of golf, you're doing it for the whole game. Now, if we didn't have professional golf, they probably would be a bit shorter. The rules be a bit more simple. But that's the deck of cards that we're dealt with, and no, I don't regret it. It's there's people in life who always take the easy option, and there are people in life who do things that are right. And I like to think that the RNA does what is right. Sometimes it's really difficult, and it's really painful. But I don't think anyone could ever accuse us of not trying to do what is right.
No, I hasten to add that I'm all in favour of yourselves and the USGA doing it, because somebody has to. at the end of the day, and the long history of doing it, you've got more experience and more knowledge of that sort of stuff than anybody else. So I'm all for that. But I do wonder if you just think, you roll your eyes sometimes and you think, oh my goodness, why do we bother with all this stuff? Because it's endlessly complicated.
Yeah, sometimes you sort of, it's not just here, but it's in my entire life. You go, gosh, do I really want all this hassle? But I've never been someone who's wanted an easy life, John.
And has your view changed at all on bifurcation? Is that inevitable?
Well,
do you think?
I think. I mean, I don't use that word, as you know, and I don't use it purposely because I think it represents a very static, binary concept, and I do think that what we have started to use and talk about model local rules. And some people have said, well, that's just bifurcation by another word. But actually, it's not. It's, if you really think about it, what we're trying to do is to create some dynamic options for the game and get away from a sort of a binary, static bifurcation model. And I think that the game is so varied that it needs that option. And options to be able to go forward. I have very consistently said that, technology over the last 30 years has been a fantastic development to make our game a little bit easier to play. There is no doubt in my mind, when I started to play, the hardest club to hit in the bag was a persimmon one wood. Where today, if you ask my wife, the easiest club to hit in the bag is her driver. And that is a really good thing.
For the vast majority, yes, absolutely.
But then I also say that, there's a balance, that the layer on that is a balance of skill and technology. And what we want to make sure is that the game is always a game of skill. And so that you get varieties within that.
I mean, there's two sides to every coin, and that you're absolutely sure. Right. The big-headed driver and all the rest, the more forgiving clubs is a great thing for the vast majority of golfers. However, I always tell the Robert Rock story. A couple of years ago, I was wandering about at the event in Turkey, and I came across Robert Rock's group, and I wandered up a hole with them, and he came over. He'd driven off. And he kind of just slightly right of centre, and he'd driven off, and he said to me, he says, where do you think on the face I just hit that shot? I says, well, I have no idea. He says, if I'd been using a persimmon wood, he says, I might have missed the ball completely with that swing. And yet he was up the fairway, maybe 10 yards back from where he would have been with a good shot. So that's the unintended consequence of this, is that people with real talent, they're getting too much help, maybe.
Well, I think that's my point about the balance between skill and technology, John. When you talk about your favorite golfers, at the end of the day, I hope, when I finish here, people said, actually, he's a golf geek. He loved golf and did things to help the game. But you asked me about my favorite players, through the I always go for the ones who are more creative. Seve, to me, probably wasn't the greatest golfer of all time. But for me, he's the best.
Well, he was the one that, even at the end of his career, when he couldn't hit his hat, with his long game. I mean, Jeff Ogilvy told me this, that when he was playing the European Tour, Seve was coming towards the end, and even at the end there, if Seve came onto the chipping green or the pitching area, everybody stopped and watched. That was what separated him. I mean, he was a genius inside 70 yards. I mean, he could do things, and he hated I wrote a column once berating the development of the 60-degree wedge, and he loved that column. He even came and told me that how much he loved it because, as he put it, everybody can now hit the shots that only I could hit. It took away his edge.
And that sort of goes back to that point about skill in my mind. I've been fortunate to play a bit of golf with Sandy Lyle here in St Andrews, and Sandy loves still playing golf. And I was playing with him about 2 years ago, and another friend of ours here. And it was a windy day out in the new course. And it was essentially downwind on the way out and into the wind on the way back. And downwind, the three of us, I was hitting about the ball about the same distance as Sandy. And then we turned.
I know where you're heading with this, yeah.
And I was suddenly 25 yards behind him. And I said, Sandy, what's going on? And he said, you've got no idea how to hit a low spinning ball, have you? And I went, how do you do it? And he said, I've got no idea. Just think about it.
Well, that was part of Sandy's genius, of course. Yeah.
Oh, and he's still a genius at it. But it's still in the modern game. And this is where I think, I do think some of the media commentary is wrong. And that style is still in the modern game. And I will give you two examples. One was when Tiger won the FedEx playoff at East Lake when he was playing with Rory. And he was giving Rory 50 yards off the tee. And he was just shaping the ball into the fairways. But the other one I give is Dustin Johnson winning the Masters last year. All the talk was about Bryson. All the media just wanted to talk about Bryson. And there was Dustin. And if you watch him play, and I loved it, absolutely loved it. I mean, he was hitting the ball hard. But what he was doing was finding the fairways. And he was shaping the ball with that left to right shot that he has. And he was putting the ball in the fairway. And I stood up and clapped. So it still is there in the game. And I think we mustn't forget that it's still there and really recognize that style of play is still.
Yeah, I think had you been at the last President's Cup at Royal Melbourne and walked, if you'd walked around with Mike Clayton and I when we watched Tiger, that was the same kind of feeling we had, that he separated himself on that golf course. He could do things and hit the shots that were required that like nobody else could. I mean, he was miles better than everybody else on that golf course, and it was an education to watch him. It really was.
I mean, I mean, Royal Melbourne. I've had the privilege of playing Royal Melbourne once, and I stood on the first. I think it was the first tee because we played all the holes.
I can't keep up with that place because it's all composite courses and numbers. Oh, it's a nightmare.
And I remember I was pretty nervous and a bit jet lagged, and I hit a reasonably good tee shot, and I think I had a short iron into the green, and I hit it, and I thought, that's good. It bounced on the green, and then my mouth fell open because it went through the green by about 20 yards, and I learned in one hole what that golf course was all about, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful golf course. But so those sandbelt courses. I mean, during the President's Cup, I played with Jay at Kingston Heath very early one morning, 7. Oh, and I stayed and played again in the afternoon. I mean, it's great golf, and it's thinking players golf. And I do think that when you look at the great golf courses in the world, they're all ones that make you think.
Well, you're leading me into my next subject, which I'm going to get to. And Royal Melbourne, which we just mentioned, again, when I was walking around with Mike Clayton when we were watching Tiger, we calculated, or he did, more than I did, that to get those guys, the top guys, hitting the clubs into the greens that Alistair Mackenzie envisioned when he designed the place, it would have to be over 9,000 yards long. So, which leads us into the inevitable, which you just knew I was going to bring this up, was the interminable distance debate that's going on and on and on. Where are you with that at the moment, and how soon is it going to be at least some kind of conclusion that you're going to announce?
Well, I mean, we are now well into the process. And it's a process that needs to be followed and treated with respect. And we're very much through in the initial stages of that. I mean, we did a very detailed research document, Distance Insights, which I've listened to some of your podcasts before, and I think you've read it, and I think Mike Clayton's read it as well. And I think that really lays out our view. And we're now in what's called the area of interest phase, which is all around what we the topics that we are interested in doing. And I'm not going to prejudge any of those conversations, but I have been totally consistent that the line in the sand, I think, has been passed. Longer courses, longer time to play is taking the game in the wrong direction, and that I want to see a serious conversation around how we get this balance of skill and technology. It's going to take. It's not going to happen overnight. I know there are some who would like it to, but it's not going to. But it will be a serious conversation as we move through this.
Do you think you're going to be able to take everybody with you on this? Is there enough common ground? I mean, the signs are not good, just based on history. That's why I asked that question. I just wondered if you think that you can, specifically the equipment companies, are they going to go with you on this?
I don't think everyone's going to come with us on this. I think we would be rather naive to think that, but we will have an honest conversation with everybody and allow everybody to have their views and express their views in an intelligent and thoughtful way. I do think there are, I've said it before, that the industry, whether that's the players, whether it's the 99% who play for love, whether it's the governing bodies, is full of very serious people who understand the sport that we were fortunate to be involved in, and there is a serious conversation going on, and I'm listening. My views are they've been publicly expressed, and I'm one thing I think the game will get used to with me is I'm very consistent. I might be consistently wrong in the eyes of some people, but I'm very consistent. And we have thought about this a lot.
If this ends up in a courtroom, Martin, it seems to me, I worry about this genuinely, not only for the game, but for the R&A and the USGA and the position within the game. I mean, the implications of losing ultimately are hard. It's hard to imagine how bad that could be. I mean, is that something that you've considered?
I spent 30 years in corporate life. I've seen complicated projects. But I've also learned that you look at every single angle and you think about as many different things that that could happen, and that's how you ensure success. It's no guarantee. But we will work through, if we work through with intelligence and the right timing and putting the game at the center, then we should come to a sensible outcome, and that's what I'm trying to achieve.
I hope I'm with you on that. I just but, as you know, I bang on about this subject quite a lot, and I can never get my head around a couple of aspects of it. Is why golf has gone in a different, and you've heard me say this before probably, a different direction from other sports like the javelin and baseball and cricket and tennis, who've done things to the equipment to protect their venues, whereas we seem to be going in the opposite direction, and we're protecting the equipment at the expense of the venues, because to me the golf courses are the biggest victims in all of this. It's certainly at the top level of the game again we're talking about.
Yeah, I think, but I can't do anything about history. We are where we are, and I think we've been very clear that we wouldn't want to see that going any further. And I just, if you go back to the Distance Insights report, I was very clear around, and Mike Davis and I agreed the same wording. It was, longer distances, longer time to play, longer driving is taking the game in the wrong direction. We've been very clear. Where we go from here, that will take time and work through that. But go back to all of our earlier discussion, John. What drives me is the passion for our sport, and I want to make sure I do the right thing the whole sport and get the right answer that we're all comfortable with.
Yeah. I'm conscious that I've kept you talking here for just over an hour, and I wanted to end up just by bouncing around a little bit. Golf in the Olympics. Dustin Johnson recently announced that he's basically can't be bothered to go and play for America in Japan this year. I must admit, when Olympics golf came up first, I was kind of ambivalent, but I was tipped over the edge by the notion that governments do spend an awful lot more money on sports that are in the Olympics, and it's got to be beneficial for golf to stay in there. Is that your view, and how do you feel about the future of golf in the Olympics?
I think, to be fair to Dustin, he did not phrase it how you just phrased it.
No, probably not.
And, it is in the, we're all trying to work out how to live and travel in a post-pandemic world. So
you're cutting him more slack than I would, but yeah, good on you.
Yeah. Look, I think the Olympics is the greatest showcase of sport in the world. And, I think having golf in it enabled us to tap into an audience that we previously weren't able to tap into. And that there are certainly in the developing countries of golf where gold medals or winning medals is an important part of the psyche, a bit like, in the years when you and I grew up in East Germany, how important it was to win medals for the East Germans.
Well, it's how they won those medals is a different issue, but yeah.
That's a different topic. But, go back to my earlier point. We are only going to succeed in growing golf if we talk to people who don't play golf today. If we continue to be obsessed by only talking to people who play golf, then you're writing the sense of failure from the very beginning. And I think the Olympics gives a fantastic opportunity to talk to people who don't play golf today. And Rio was challenging, to say the least. But I can remember how the gold medals were won, and I'm sure a lot of people who don't play golf would have watched it, and the audiences showed.
Yeah, I think you're right. The pluses far outweigh the minuses, and there is an enormous ignorance out there. I mean, one of my daily rituals now in the midst of this pandemic is watching The Chase on television at 5:00, and whenever a golf question pops up, it's immediately 9 times out of 10 it's pass. The people just don't know anything about golf, and that's something that needs to change if we're going to achieve the things that you want to achieve, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, and we got to stop obsessing about things that we think are really important, because people who don't play golf go, so what? Anyway,
that kind of, again, I'm bouncing around a little bit just to finish up. Saudi Arabia has a profile in golf has been rising the last few months. They seem to be, in the background at least, getting involved in lots of things. Where does the R&A draw the line on, going to places, taking money from, regimes like Saudi Arabia? Is there a line to be drawn somewhere? I find it very difficult, because if you start down that road, you'd never go to other countries, like China and the Middle East and all kinds of places like that. But Saudi Arabia seems to be particularly egregious in that department. Is there an official line from the R&A on that?
I think it's, we often in sport and in the R&A, it's drawing this line of, we want to talk about sport, not politics, and it's very difficult. The higher up the food chain you go to draw that line, as you well know and just expressed. If golf can grow in Saudi, and particularly if women's golf could grow in Saudi, and look what they're doing to help the LET, is enormous. So the Ladies European Tour, with the Aramco series coming in, and the hosting of events there, if we can get more women playing golf, then that's something that I think is important. But everywhere you go in the world and every business you work with, there's always this little bit of balance about politics and sport. But if we can stay pure to more people playing golf, then I'm doing my job.
Yeah, I mean, it's always again. There's two sides to it. I mean, people say that we should be going to places like that just because it encourages change, political change, and social change in those places. But the other side of that argument, of course, is that if you do start going, they stop changing because they think they've done enough. I'm not sure where I stand on that, and I'm not sure. It's an incredibly difficult issue. It really is.
Yeah, I think nothing we do in any country is done out of sense of ignorance about the macro issue. But we do say we're not politicians. We are about making this game better.
My last question, Martin, is the pandemic. We've touched on that a few times. I mean, how has that affected your working life? Is there a typical day in the working life of Martin Slumbers, or has it become more typical because you've not been able to travel?
I mean, it's difficult to talk about the pandemic on a personal level, John, given the dreadful situation many people have had through this, and I count myself lucky that my family have not been affected. But from a working point of view, it's been extremely difficult. And I think I do not buy into the subject that office life is finished. I think we are human beings who like to interact, and our business is built around human interactions, and I miss that enormously. And virtual does not replace it. You having an interview with you in a virtual environment is very different to you sitting 6 feet away.
Yeah,
from me in my
ordinarily
office.
we'd have done this in your wonderful office. I mean, I understand why you quite like going into your office every day. It might be the best office on the planet.
Well, I work in my office Mondays and Tuesdays now. But for me personally, just I've spent most of my career traveling. I had a global job in the banking world for many, many years, and I've never been at home as long as I have been in the last 25 years. And my wife's probably looking forward to me getting back out on the road.
Yeah, and so this year, are you going to? We're talking the week before the Masters. I take it you're not going to Augusta, or what's your plans on travel?
No, it's a great disappointment. I couldn't go to Augusta, and the reason for that is May 7th is the Walker Cup in America. At Seminole Golf Club, and we amateur golf is really important to the R&A, and because of the quarantining rules, it would be very difficult to do Augusta, come back, quarantine, then be able to go back out to represent Great Britain and Ireland. And so I prioritise the Walker Cup.
Right. Okay. So are you going to be one of the people who's going to be paying $500 for the 3 days to watch the Walker Cup? I was reading about that. So that seemed like an extraordinary sum of money for organisations that look to be growing the game. I mean,
I think for the R&A, if it only cost us $500, it would be a bargain.
Yes. Listen, on that note, Martin, thank you very much for your time. It's been a joy talking to you. It's been interesting and illuminating as always. And thanks for being on The Thing About Golf.
You're very welcome, John, and take care and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Stay safe. And that's it for episode 39. I hope you've taken away as much as I did from Huggy's chat with Martin Slumbers. Some really big issues covered there and lots to chew on from some of those answers. Now, I hope you've taken the time to subscribe to the show because next week, COVID willing, I'm off to Melbourne to do a couple of interviews for upcoming episodes. And while I won't reveal who they're with, I will say that they are some extremely interesting people. So make sure to come back next time here on The Thing About Golf.